The CEO of a billion-dollar company disguises himself as an ordinary worker to see how his employees are treated. But instead of respect, his arrogant manager humiliates him in front of everyone, mocking him, giving him the worst tasks, and treating him like trash. The CEO stays silent, enduring the humiliation, observing every detail. But deep inside, he's planning something big. When the disguise finally comes off, the manager's world comes crashing down. The same man he insulted turns out to be his ultimate boss. And the payback? Brutal. Public exposure, career-ending consequences, and a lesson the manager, and everyone watching, will never forget. Before start the story, like, share, subscribe for future updates. He walked into the company he built from scratch, but no one recognized him. Dressed in a cheap shirt, worn-out shoes, and a plain cap pulled low, the CEO looked nothing like the man who commanded boardrooms and headlines. Today, he wasn't the billionaire visionary. He was just another new worker on the factory floor. And that was exactly what he wanted. For months, he had heard whispers, complaints about unfair treatment, stories of good employees being crushed under arrogant managers. And though reports landed on his desk, he knew numbers and spreadsheets could never show the truth. If he wanted to see how his empire was really being run, he needed to walk in the shadows, to feel what his workers felt. The first day should have been simple. Clock in, blend in, observe. But before the hour was over, he got his first taste of humiliation. The manager stormed across the room, his voice sharp and cold, barking orders at everyone. When his eyes landed on the disguised CEO, they narrowed with disdain.
You.
New guy. What's your name? The CEO hesitated for a moment, then replied with the name he had chosen for this undercover mission. James, sir. James? The manager smirked. Figures. You look like a James. Useless. Slow. Do you even know how to hold a broom? The words hit like a slap. Employees nearby lowered their heads, pretending not to hear, but the silence spoke louder than the insults. This wasn't the first time the manager had spoken this way. The CEO could see it in their faces, the fear, the resignation, the quiet acceptance of daily humiliation. He picked up the broom without a word, sweeping the same corner 3 times, his mind racing. Every insult, every cruel laugh was being etched into memory. He wasn't just undercover to watch. He was here to judge. And judgment, he knew, was coming. The hours dragged on. The manager assigned him the dirtiest, most exhausting tasks. He carried heavy boxes until his arms ached. He cleaned grease from machines while the manager mocked him, calling him pathetic loud enough for the whole floor to hear. The other workers offered small glances of sympathy, but no one dared to step in. During lunch, while others gathered in groups, the CEO sat alone at a corner table. His tray was empty, except for a small sandwich. He watched his employees laugh quietly, but their laughter never reached their eyes. They kept one ear open for the sound of the manager's footsteps, like soldiers waiting for an enemy's attack. And then it happened. The manager walked in and spotted him eating alone. With a cruel grin, he grabbed the sandwich right from his tray. You call this lunch? No wonder you look weak. You'll never survive here. He took a bite, chewed slowly, then tossed the rest into the trash. The room fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The CEO clenched his fists under the table, but his face remained calm. Inside, though, a storm was brewing. Not for the sandwich, not for the broom, but for the arrogance, the sick pleasure of tearing down the people who worked the hardest. That night, when the shift ended, he went home exhausted but not broken. Instead, he felt sharper, more awake than ever before. He wrote down every detail in a notebook. The insults, the unfair assignments, the stolen lunch. He wanted a record. He wanted proof. Because soon, all of it would matter. Day 2 was worse. The manager called him trash. He laughed at his mistakes, shoved paperwork in his hands, and sneered, "You'll never be anything more than this. People like you don't get promotions. You're born to serve." Those words stung. Not because they were true, but because the CEO thought about how many honest workers had been told the same lie. How many dreams were crushed because one arrogant man decided he was better than everyone else. The undercover mission was no longer just an experiment. It was personal. And then came the breaking point. The manager staged a humiliation in front of the entire staff. He handed the disguised CEO a broken piece of equipment and shouted, "Fix it or you're fired. Right here, right now." The CEO looked down at the machine, knowing it couldn't be fixed without proper tools. But before he could explain, the manager cut him off. "Don't talk back to me, James. Look at him, everyone. This is what failure looks like. Weak, useless, replaceable. You think this company needs men like him? I could fire him today, and no one would care." The room was silent. Some workers looked down in shame. Others stole quick glances at James, pity in their eyes. The manager laughed, proud of his display. And in that moment, the CEO made his decision. The disguise would not last much longer. The lesson was ready to be delivered. He picked up the broken equipment, placed it carefully on the table, and stood tall. For the first time, his eyes locked with the manager's, not as James, the weak worker, but as the man who held the power to destroy or to elevate. The manager didn't know it yet, but the brutal payback was coming. And when it arrived, it would burn hotter than any humiliation he had ever dished out. This was only the beginning. The next morning, James walked back into the building with a steady calm. On the surface, nothing had changed. He still wore the same plain clothes, still clocked in like every other worker, and still carried the quiet, submissive look the manager expected. But beneath that calm exterior, something dangerous was rising. He had seen enough. The humiliation, the arrogance, the abuse of power. It was all boiling inside him, ready to erupt. The manager, of course, had no idea. He strutted across the floor with his usual swagger, barking insults, making himself feel like a king among peasants. When he saw James sweeping near the corner, he smirked. "Ah, my favorite failure. Didn't quit yet? Impressive. Most weaklings like you would have run away crying." James didn't reply. He simply lowered his head, gripping the broom tightly, hiding the fire in his eyes. The other workers exchanged glances. They had started to sense something unusual about this new guy. He didn't fight back, didn't argue, but there was something in his silence. A weight, a presence that made them wonder who he really was. By midday, the manager decided it was time for another public spectacle. He called James into the office in front of the staff. "Come here, loser," he barked. "I've got a special assignment for you." Inside the office, he shoved a stack of reports across the desk. "I want these cleaned up, organized, and on my table in 2 hours. Don't screw it up, or you're gone. Simple as that." James glanced at the papers. They weren't his responsibility. They weren't even part of his department. But he didn't argue. He picked them up carefully, nodded, and walked out. The manager laughed to himself. Pathetic. He'll never finish. Perfect chance to get rid of him once and for all. But what he didn't know was that the man he mocked had spent decades reading and analyzing reports exactly like those. Every chart, every graph, every number was familiar. In less than an hour, James had organized the entire stack with the precision of a master. When he placed them back on the desk, perfectly sorted, the manager's smirk faltered. How did you?" James said nothing. He simply turned and walked out, leaving the manager stunned. That night, word spread among the workers. "Did you see what James did? How did he finish that so fast?" Their whispers grew louder. Respect, the kind the manager had crushed, was now being given quietly to the man they thought was just another worker. And the manager noticed. His anger deepened. The following day, the breaking point arrived. The manager called a meeting with all staff. He wanted to put James in his place once and for all. In the center of the floor, with everyone gathered, he raised his voice. "This company has no room for incompetence. And this man," he pointed directly at James, his finger trembling with rage, "is the perfect example of dead weight. He is slow, he is weak, and he will never rise above this floor. I could fire him today, and no one would miss him." The employees looked uneasy. Some shifted in their seats. They had seen James work tirelessly, silently, without complaint. They had seen him handle tasks others couldn't. And deep down, they knew the manager's words weren't true. But fear kept them silent. James stood in the middle of the room, his head bowed, his fists clenched at his sides. He let the insults pour over him one last time. And then, with a calm, steady breath, he lifted his head. "Are you finished?" His voice was soft, but it carried weight. The room froze. No one had ever spoken back to the manager before. The manager's face twisted. "What did you just say to me?" "I asked," James repeated, his eyes now locked on the man who had tormented him. "Are you finished?" The room went silent. The workers held their breath. The manager's fury boiled over. He stepped closer, jabbing a finger in James's chest. "You're done here.
Pack your things.
Get out of my company." And that was the moment James decided it was time. Time to end the disguise. Time to reveal who he truly was. He straightened his shoulders, his presence shifting from submissive worker to something powerful, commanding. His eyes no longer looked down. They looked straight ahead, filled with authority. "Your company?" James asked, his voice steady. "Tell me, do you even know who you're speaking to?" The manager scoffed. "You're a nobody. A piece of trash I'm about to throw out." James allowed a small smile to play at the corner of his lips. Then, in front of the entire staff, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek ID card. On it was his real name, his real title.
CEO.
Gasps echoed through the room. Chairs scraped the floor as workers stood, their eyes wide with shock. The manager's face went pale, the blood draining as he read the card. This can't be," he stammered. "Oh, but it is," James replied, his voice suddenly filled with the authority of the man who owned everything in that room. "I am the CEO of this company, and I have spent the last week watching you humiliate, degrade, and abuse the very people who keep this place running. You thought you were humiliating a weak worker, but every insult you spat, every cruel laugh you made, you directed at your own boss." The silence was crushing. The workers stared, torn between fear and awe. The manager stumbled back, his hands trembling, sweat dripping from his forehead. "Sir, I didn't know. I was just what?" James cut in sharply, his tone razor sharp. "Just crushing spirits? Just mocking people who work harder than you ever have? Just feeding your ego by tearing others down?"
No.
"There are no excuses. What you've done is unacceptable. And now, it's my turn." The manager's knees weakened. His arrogance vanished in seconds. He looked around, desperate for someone to defend him, but no one spoke. For the first time, he stood alone. The workers, however, felt something they hadn't felt in years: hope. Their silent suffering had finally been seen. Their dignity was being restored. James stepped closer to the manager, lowering his voice but making sure every word echoed. "You thought this was your kingdom, but let me make it very clear. This is not your throne. It never was. And now, you're about to face the consequences of your actions." The manager's lips trembled. "Please, sir, I can explain." But there was no room left for excuses. The room was frozen. Every eye was locked on the man they once thought was a weak worker, now revealed as the powerful CEO. The manager's arrogance had vanished, replaced by fear. He stammered, his voice shaking. "Sir, please, I didn't mean it was just..." But James, no longer James, but the CEO in full power, raised his hand and silence fell over the floor. His calm was more terrifying than any outburst. "You humiliated me in front of my people. You mocked me, you stole my food, you treated me like garbage. Not because I was incompetent, not because I was weak, but because you could, because cruelty gives you pleasure." His voice carried across the floor, each word sharp as a blade. The manager's lips quivered. I was only trying to maintain discipline." "Discipline?" the CEO repeated, his tone like thunder. "You don't build discipline by crushing dignity. You don't build loyalty by humiliating the very people who give their sweat and blood for this company. You've mistaken fear for respect. but respect is earned, and today your mask comes off just like mine." The workers stood still, barely breathing. For years, they had endured the manager's tyranny. For years, they had swallowed their anger in silence. And now, the man who owned everything was standing where they had once stood, saying the words they had longed to hear. The manager dropped to his knees, desperation flooding his eyes. "Please, I can change.
Give me another chance.
I'll treat everyone better. I'll fix this." The CEO's eyes narrowed. He had heard these kinds of promises before, empty words spoken when consequences loomed. He bent slightly, locking his gaze with the trembling man. "You want a chance to change? That chance was every day you came to this place and chose cruelty over kindness. That chance is over." The manager's breath hitched. He looked around the room, hoping someone, anyone, would defend him. But the workers he had once controlled with fear now looked at him with quiet satisfaction. For the first time, they felt justice. The CEO straightened, his voice steady. "You're finished here. Effective immediately, you are relieved of all duties. Security will escort you out. You will not step foot in this building again." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The manager's world crumbled in seconds. His face drained of color, his knees buckled, and he collapsed fully to the floor. "No, please, sir, I beg you. This job is all I have." The CEO's jaw tightened. "And the dignity of these people is all they had. You stole it from them every single day. You enjoyed watching them suffer. Today, you learn what it feels like to be powerless." At his signal, 2 security guards stepped forward. They lifted the broken man to his feet as he struggled, his pleas turning to sobs. "Please, I can't. I'll do anything." But his words fell into emptiness. The workers didn't move. They didn't stop the guards. They simply watched, a silent reminder that his reign of cruelty was over. As the doors closed behind him, a heavy silence lingered. Then, slowly, the workers turned their eyes back to the CEO. Some were still in shock, others on the verge of tears. For the first time in years, they saw hope standing before them. The CEO took a deep breath. His eyes softened as he looked around. "I came here undercover because I wanted to see the truth.
And I did.
I saw the strength you carry every day.
I saw the sacrifices you make.
I saw the way you endured. No one should ever be treated the way I was treated this week, the way you've been treated for years. That ends today." A murmur spread through the crowd, rising into something more powerful. Workers straightened their backs. Their faces lifted with a mix of relief and pride. "This company is not built on titles or power," the CEO continued. "It is built on you. Every box you carry, every machine you fix, every long hour you give. You are the backbone of this empire. And from this day forward, you'll be treated as such. With dignity, with respect, with fairness." The room erupted in applause. Some clapped with trembling hands, others with tears streaming down their faces. It wasn't just applause for the CEO. It was applause for justice, for a new beginning. The CEO raised his hand again, and the room quieted. "One more thing. If any manager, any supervisor, or anyone else ever dares to treat you the way he treated me, you will come directly to me. No more fear. No more silence. This company belongs to all of us, and I will not allow arrogance to poison it again." The applause returned, louder this time, echoing through the walls. Workers embraced one another. For the first time in years, they felt free. The CEO allowed himself a small smile. This was why he had gone undercover. Not for the drama, not for the disguise, but for the truth. He had seen it, he had felt it, and now, he was ready to rebuild the foundation of his empire stronger than ever. Later that evening, as he walked out of the building, he glanced back at the factory floor. The same machines hummed, the same workers moved, but the energy was different. There was life in their steps, pride in their eyes, and that was worth more than any profit, any title, any number on a report. The manager, who once ruled with fear, was gone. But the lesson he left behind would never be forgotten. Arrogance destroys. Humility rebuilds. And dignity, once stolen, when returned, becomes unshakable. The CEO climbed into his car, the city lights flickering in the distance. He thought of the week he had spent as James, the humiliations he had endured, the pain he had felt. And he thought of the faces of his workers, the spark that had returned to their eyes. He whispered to himself, that was worth it. Every second of it. As the car pulled away, the story of what happened inside those walls began to spread. Employees told their families, their friends, and soon the entire company knew. The tale of the undercover CEO who was humiliated by his own manager and delivered brutal, unforgettable payback became legend. And with every retelling, one truth remained: respect is not optional, and dignity is not negotiable.